It's April and the springtime is the time of year where I like to target plaice, see if I can pick up a few plaice. Now the most common way to fish for plaice is with fresh baits or frozen baits. So it could be worms, it could be lugworm or ragworm, it could be peeler crab, it could be small strips of squid, or it could be fish baits or a cocktail bait. And the most common method is to fish those baits on small hooks and then add to your trace, add to your snood a bit of bling. Maybe in my case I like to use coloured beads and maybe a few sequins. Some people like to use spoons as well, and spoons and beads to add that bit of bling which plaice are known to be attracted to. And then the method, if you're out at sea, out on a kayak or out on a boat, is usually to drift fish for them, drift fish over the clean ground, over the sand, to get that movement to attract the fish. Or, of course, fishing from the shore, from the beaches or from the rocks, casting out, either fishing a static bait with a grip lead or fishing a plain lead and letting that bait move around with the tide. But plaice are a predatory fish like most fish. They will maybe sit flat on the seabed, maybe slightly buried under the sand with those two eyes looking up, and then maybe if a small crab comes by or a sand eel or a small fish, bang, they'll get out and grab it. But they'll also follow and chase baits. So because of that, again, like most fish, they can also be caught on lures. Now, lure fishing for plaice is not new. There are anglers that fish for them with lures and have caught them with lures. But as said, the most common way, the most talked about way, the most shown way is to fish with baits and maybe add a bit of bling to your snood. So I went out on the kayak at the weekend, and the objective was to fish for plaice with lures, but to see if I can get on film actually catching plaice with lures. Mainly for those of you that have never tried it before, or have never seen it before, or never even thought that you can fish for plaice with lures. So before we look at the footage of how I got on, what I thought I'd do is have a look at some of the lures that I use, but also the rig, the setup that I use. This is just a sample of some of the small soft plastics that I like to use when I go plaice fishing. But of course there'll be plenty of other small lures on the market that would also be suitable. Now the first two are these scented lures. The lures that are kept in a liquid, so instead of just having an action, they also give off a scent. And the first one is a ragworm imitation. It's the well-known Isome lure, which is popular with the LRF anglers. Now, when I'm looking for soft plastics for plaice fishing, I usually look for lures that range between, let's say, about 2.5 inches to 3.5 inches at the most. But this one is actually 4 inches, but that's not a problem because it's very thin and pliable. The plaice would have no problem in drawing that in. But with these lures, you can, if you want, clip them down to make them a bit smaller, or just buy a smaller version. This one, I think, was the extra large. Next, got this curly tail lure, and this is the 3-inch Ecogear Aqua, I think you pronounce it, Milfle. And these type of lures that have got this type of curly tail, they give a great action in the water. I'm not sure if the company make these anymore. I did a quick search on the internet and I couldn't actually find any, but there'll be plenty of others on the market that are very similar to this lure. Next, got the well-known Sluggo, which is a brilliant sand eel imitation. This is the 3-inch Sluggo. And then next I've got a minnow soft plastic that's got the split tail. Now these two here are both made by Berkeley, and I got them from their Berkeley perch pack, which I thought would be quite good for the plaice fishing, but also good for wrasse fishing as well. So we've got the Berkeley minnow 3-inch, and then a little paddle tail, and I think that one's about 2 3/4 inches long. Both, of course, to imitate small fish. Okay, so that's the lures, and we'll have a look now at the way I set this up and the rig that I use. Now, have any of you ever watched videos on YouTube from the US, from the States, when they're fishing for flounder, what they call fluke, particularly when they're out on the boats fishing for flounder? For example, the brilliant John Skinner videos when he's out on his boat fishing for flounder. Well, the rig that they use is exactly the same rig that I'm using for the plaice fishing. The only difference, of course, would be the type of the lures that I use. And this is it. So what we've got down at the end of the rig, the bottom of the rig, what I've done, I've just tied a loop knot to enable me to loop the jig head on with the soft plastic attached. And this jig head is only a light jig head. It only weighs 14 grams on a size 1/0 hook. And then only about a foot from that, I've tied a short standoff loop to attach another soft plastic, which is known as a teaser. And in this case, it's on a size 2 Aberdeen hook. And then about a foot and a half from that, at the top of the rig, I've just tied a swivel. Now, either of these can catch. Sometimes the teaser will catch, sometimes your main lure on the jig head will catch. Now, of course, this is plaice fishing, which means you're only fishing small lures, and you only want to be fishing small jig heads. Now, big, bulky, heavy jig heads, of course, wouldn't be suitable. But when I'm out fishing on the kayak, I'm fishing in water that ranges from, let's say, about 20 feet up to about 50, 60 feet. So I've got to be able to get these lures down to the bottom and keep them working on or very, very close to the bottom without the current lifting them up too high off the bottom. So how I do that is, and be able to fish such light jig heads, is basically fish very, very, very thin line. So what I do is fish 6-pound braid, which of course is ultra thin, and the thinness of that braid will mean that it will cut through the tide, cut through the current well, to enable me to fish those lures without it being lifted up. Now, of course, there's a limit to how light you can, and small and light you can go. But in a spring tide with the 6-pound braid, I can get away with the 14 gram, the ½ ounce jig head. And probably on a neat tide, I could probably drop that down to about 10 grams, 11 grams, and still be able to stay fishing close to the bottom. Okay, that's the rig. Very, very simple and can be very, very effective. Right, we'll have a look at the fishing now. And it's drift fishing. I'm fishing on the drift. And as I mentioned earlier, the objective was to get it on film to show a plaice being caught on lures. Now, it's only a short session, and I'll explain why after. Right, so I've got 2 rods set up, and on the first rod, I've got the worm down on the jig, and then I've got the curly tail as the teaser. And the idea with that one is that I'm just going to lower that down to the bottom. Lower it down to the bottom, let out a bit of slack, and just pop that in the rod holder, and let that fish itself exactly the same as if I was fishing with proper bait. So you literally just let it drag along the bottom. And all I have to do is I'm drifting as the depths change. Let's say I drift out to deeper water, then all I need to do is just to adjust it, just to make sure that I stay in contact with the bottom. Right, that's the first rod down. And with the second rod, I've got the opposite. I've got the curly tail down on the jig head, and I've got the worm as the teaser. And with this one, I'm going to manually work it. So lower it down to the bottom, and then just jig it. Just little short, sharp jigs down the bottom, and occasionally maybe raise it up from the bottom, and then let it drop down again. Right, so that's on the bottom. And as I said, just gently jig that, and just make sure I stay in contact with the bottom. And with the 6 pound, just the 6 pound braid, we've got a big spring tide today, so there's plenty of current. I'm actually able to maintain a vertical jig, even though I'm only fishing a half an ounce jig head. So fingers crossed, I'll show you this actually catching place. Might catch some other things as well, of course. But what a morning, fantastic morning. I'm glad I got up now. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning to get down here for first light. And as always, when you do these sort of things, when you're lying in bed, you think, oh no. But once you got yourself up and got yourself down here and got out here on a rare morning like this, it's worth it. Well, there you go. And this is on the one that's just fishing itself. So it just goes to show you, it may not be a Plaice, of course, even though it's a soft plastic, just dragging along the bottom, fishing itself. And how about that? A Plaice. And it's taken the little curly tail. Fantastic. I'm really pleased. Whenever you try and show a new method, although it's not new to some, and try and get it on film, it's always really pleasing to show that it works. Now, when you're drift fishing for Plaice or other species, the idea of the drift fishing, of course, is that you've got movement. You've got movement to cover the ground, and you've got movement to maybe get those lures moving, or that bait, if you're drifting for Plaice, to get that bait moving along the bottom. Now, fishing static, fishing in one place is fine if you know that the Plaice are down below you, or you know that the Plaice will be moving through that area that you're fishing. But in my case, what I was trying to do is trying to cover as much ground as possible. Now, even though with the jigging of the lures vertically up and down like that, that's fine, but you still want to be working them up and down, but you need those lures to be moving forward with the drift as well. And likewise, on the rod that I caught the Plaice, just dragging the lures along the bottom, I need the movement. But what happened, not long after I caught that fish, it went completely flat calm. It went just like a mirror. Now, which is great, it's kayak fishing, it's sea fishing safety, it's great to get those conditions to be out there. But for this type of fishing, you need that happy medium. You want it okay to go out there, but you need that movement. So if you look at the conditions, when I caught the fish, you can see the difference. You can see in those conditions, I had that movement, and then the conditions it went to, where I've had virtually no movement. And I checked the speed on the GPS that I was drifting when it was flat calm. And even though it was a big spring tide, I was only averaging about 0.3 of a mile in the drift. Pretty hopeless, really. You need probably at least 1 mile per hour or more, as I say, to cover that ground, to get those lures moving to stimulate those fish to take. So basically what happened, I'd done the objective, I got it on film, caught a plaice, obviously wanted to catch more, but realised that it was absolutely hopeless. So I packed it in and went off and fished for something else. I went on a reef, visited a couple of reefs and did a bit of mackerel fishing and that. But the main thing is that with this video, that it shows, for those of you that have never tried this before, that you can catch plaice on lures, and it's an alternative. Now, if I was asked the question, in my experience, which is the most productive? Obviously, it depends if the fish are there or they're not there, but I would say the conventional method of dragging a bait, a normal bait along the bottom, is probably more productive than the lure fishing. But if you want a bit of a challenge, you want a change, you want a bit of fun, trying something different, trying to catch them a different way, then definitely lures do work, given that the fish are there at the time. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.